Barton, I hope you're doing well. Welcome into the game here in Tuscaloosa.
Hey, thank you for having me. All's good.
Hey, Barton, I'm going to have to go to a guy that went to the Ivy League school. How do you say this guy's last name? Justin Eboigbe? Is that the way you say it? I may not even be close.
I haven't had the pronunciation lesson yet. I've been calling him Eboigbe.
Okay, that's close enough. That's probably closer than I did.
I'm not sure if I'm right either. He is. We'll all figure it out eventually because he's a pretty good football player, and honestly, he's a lot like what Alabama typically brings in on the defensive front because he's just big, just a big human being, big joints, big hands, big body, big, type of guy that can really hold the point of attack and move offensive linemen, strong kid. And so I think he really just sort of fit what Alabama tries to get up front. From the very early stages of his recruitment, he just sort of felt like an Alabama type of kid. And here he is, 6'4.5", 265 pounds or so, and committed to Alabama. So I think that's a good one for Nick Saban to reach into Georgia and get an athletic body like that.
Barton, it's very obvious with the social networks, and we talked to you in May. I think it was the first week of May, the last time we spoke, when we were talking about Nick Saban and countering the message, negative recruiting. But they have really taken an aggressive approach on this class, and they're assembling. Could this even be in the top Nick Saban class? I mean, does this have a chance to be in that type of conversation?
I'm not ready to go there yet. I think that it's. But certainly, you're right about the sort of the trajectory and I guess the approach is a better way of saying it. I think Nick Saban learned his lesson after last cycle. He kind of misjudged, I think, the early signing period, misjudged the right way to handle it, and I think they really wanted to take their time and be deliberate and make sure they got the right guys last cycle, and then you look up and December comes and they still were hoping to hold off and pick up the typical flips and late commitments and 5-star signees that they usually get in January heading towards February, and it just didn't happen that way. And I think they're not leaving that up to chance this year. I mean, they're really attacking the recruiting trail. They're pushing the button on guys earlier in terms of taking those commitments and being willing to trust their evaluations, and I think that we're seeing a real number one class in the country. I mean that speaks for itself, and I think that they'll be absolutely in contention for the number one class all the way till February. So this is I think this thing's coming along. The blueprint is playing out as they expected. This is what they wanted to do, and I think that they're right where they want to be heading into the heart of the summer and into the fall.
Barton, did we give the credibility or enough credibility to the negative recruiting? Because Nick Saban has talked about it openly twice. It's very obvious on social network that these coaches have taken an aggressive approach of saying that it's not all business in Tuscaloosa. There is fun. I mean, they went paintball to a paintball course this past weekend, and they're tweeting out, "See, we're not all business in Tuscaloosa." Did we give enough to the negative recruiting that was being used against Nick Saban? Because I know we did, but watching these coaches take a very aggressive approach on Twitter maybe makes me realize that it was even happening more than we realized.
Well, I think I don't know. I mean, I think the negative recruiting happens, and I just think typically Alabama seems to be immune to it because they always have the number one class. I think anytime that the results don't match the expectations, and the expectations for Nick Saban have been the number one recruiting class, and when we fall short of those expectations, then it inspires you to take a closer look at your whole operation and figure out where there's some holes and where you need to do things better. And certainly, I think that there's the staff and their approach is being reinvigorated, and that's one of the areas I think that they've tried to drum up some juice is, whether it's the shop talking shop or whatever videos, whether it's the the lake videos, whether it's the the paintball stuff. I mean, the strength coach getting on Twitter. I mean, I think it's all just reflective of being trying to be less stagnant, trying to find some new approaches, trying to get the message out in a more effective way. And I think this cycle, Alabama's been as impressive as anybody in terms of their use of social media, and they've never been behind on that, but they seem to be leading the way this cycle. And again, I just think that's just sort of take an inventory of strengths and weaknesses and identifying some weaknesses and attacking them. It's been impressive. I mean, you got to give them credit. You got to tip your hat to the approach they've taken. But the negative recruiting, that's always going to be there. And it's the climate is getting tougher and tougher for Alabama with some of the other coaches that have been hired in the SEC. These guys have all been trained by Nick Saban. They know how to recruit. And so it's getting to be a tougher climate for Alabama to dominate the way they're used to. And that's taken, that's created the necessity to really reinvent yourself. And I think they've done an unbelievable job of doing that.
Barton, were you shocked that Talia was able to go to the Elite 11 and perform the way that he did, making and being one of the top 12 quarterbacks that moves on to the finals?
Not at all. I mean, I would have. It wouldn't have been shocking if he didn't quite make that 12, just because I think this class has got a lot of guys sort of bunched there together. But that said, I expected him to make that 12. I think to me, he's one of the guys that is, when he's out on the football field, his arm is right up there with the best arms in this class. His accuracy has always been consistent. His approach to the game has always been consistent. I think he really performed about like I expected him to, and I think that it's going to be really interesting to see him in Dallas at the opening finals when he's up there in a 7-on-7 type of setting and with a playbook and teammates and throw for throw with all the other elite quarterbacks in the country. And when sort of the money's on the line there, I'll be really interested to see what he looks like, because I still think he's a really elite quarterback. I don't think he's Tua, and I don't know that anyone's claiming that he is, but I think he's a really talented quarterback and a guy that I could see a multi-year starter and a really, really successful SEC kid. And yet, he's only 6 foot at absolute best, and there's some limitations there. And so I just think, the expectations have to be a little bit tempered, but he's special. And I still think he's got that Tagovailoa intangible as well, where he just he's just good at stuff. He's just, he's just comfortable in chaotic settings. And so, to answer your question, I wasn't shocked at all to see him perform at a high level out there and make it to the finals.
Let me ask you about Clay Webb. If you were a betting guy, where do you think this guy ends up? Any chance he chooses somewhere other than Alabama?
I mean, if I was a betting guy, I would still feel like Alabama is where he ends up. I don't know what the holdup is, and I mean, anytime a kid wants to let the process play out, there's always a chance. But I still think Alabama has to feel pretty good about where they are. I still think this is one of the safer bets from a sort of what you're going to get, what you see is what you get type of standpoint in this class, particularly on the defensive line. And I still think that Alabama's better recruit their tail off to land them. It's sort of one of those that even as good as Alabama may feel about him, you better work, because he's going to be a tough one to land. He's a composite 5-star kid. He's a top-ranked center in the country. He's a no-doubter. And so there's going to be a lot of temptation for him in a lot of different areas. And a lot of people are going to pitch him a really impressive, he's going to sell him a really impressive presentation. And so it's going to be very interesting to see just sort of how this thing plays out and how long this really lasts.
We're talking to Barton Simmons, CBS Sports national college football writer, 24/7 Sports director of scouting. He's also a former collegiate player as well. Barton, I cannot wait to hear your analysis of the redshirt rule now and the way that that's going to help kids develop and even coaches' evaluation. And maybe it changes the way they recruit. Maybe they thought they had something that they don't have, and maybe they need to put a different focus. I'm just really curious to hear your analysis of the redshirt rule.
I mean, I love it. I don't, this is one of those rules where I don't know if you're going to find anybody anywhere that doesn't like it. It's the players' benefits, the coaches' benefits, the fans' benefits. It's just more opportunity for these guys to develop, more opportunities for us to see these guys. I think it's going to really help. It's going to help I think special teams depth. That's an area where you really can plug and play those guys. Hey, go run down and tackle someone on kickoff. And look, I think Alabama's a great example of a program that year one, a guy like Mac Brown or Mac Wilson rather is, all he is just this heat-seeking missile on kickoff team. And then, he's sort of a spot duty guy, linebacker core as a sophomore. And then he's starting as a junior and one of the best players in the country. That's sort of, the progression we see a lot at Alabama. I feel like Rashaan Evans was a guy that you sort of see flashing on special teams a lot early in his career too. Well, this is just now as you get deep into the year and injuries start to beat up your roster a little bit. I think you can put some really talented athletes and get their feet wet in the special teams game late in the season a lot more readily than you used to be able to. And I think that helps your roster across the board. Of course, this is going to make the bowl season a lot more fun because you got 15 practices for those guys anyways, and it's often you get in some JV scrimmages within those practices. But now, hey, you can start preparing those guys, those redshirt guys, for a real game type of setting and throw them into the fire a little bit, particularly in some situations where you got a Christian McCaffrey or a Leonard Fournette that's sitting out the bowl game. All right, let's see what the young buck can do. Let's get him prepared for 15 practices and let him go out there and take some significant reps. And we could see the reveal of some young guys. I just think it's just a great, I think, rule and for getting kids the opportunity to play without threatening their eligibility. And I think we don't waste. You hear all these stories about Butch Jones playing, a kid for 3 snaps and killing his eligibility. We're not going to have those sort of tragic situations anymore where a kid just burns his eligibility because he has to get in there and as a backup in game 8. This is I just protects these kids a lot more and I think gives them an opportunity to grow within the system in a lot more organic way.
Let me ask you about the grad transfer because it looks like we've pretty much settled on that within the league since the last time we talked. Are you a guy that's for the grad transfer inside the SEC, that you're not, once you graduate, you can transfer inside the school or inside the league without permission?
Bring it on. Yeah. I'm and I know that's something Nick Saban has sort of been reluctant to accept, but I say bring it on. And I'm always going to sort of lean in favor of empowering the student athletes. I mean, the way I see this is I'm glad that the transfer rule has been amended to where kids can now transfer anywhere they want without restriction. Because look, this is one opportunity for them to have. They got 5 years to play 4 seasons of college football. This is their only opportunity to get the most out of this. And if that means transferring 3 different times, hey, go transfer 3 different times. If that means transferring within conference and Alabama or Auburn has to worry about in-conference temptations and worry about managing the depth chart and what happens. Well, you know what? Hey, you're getting paid well. Good luck. And that may seem, I guess, insensitive to the coaches, but I'm going to take the side of the student athlete who's trying to make this 4-season opportunity count. And so I think that I'm really glad that the SEC restriction has been dropped. I'm really glad that the coaches can no longer veto schools, because it's just there's too many kids that just don't get the opportunity that they should based on a coach that's got a vendetta. That should never happen. And so I'm as many misguided transfers as happen. That's okay. I can live with that, because I think more kids are going to get the opportunity to go play somewhere.
Barton Simmons, 247 Sports, Director of Scouting, CBS Sports, National College Football writer. Find him on the Twitter account at Barton Simmons. You can connect with everything it's going to be going on this summer involving the world of recruiting. Barton, as always, thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
All right, you bet. Thank you.